Okay, I'm going to call tonight's meeting to order. Can we have roll call, please?
Yes. Mayor Pro Tem Wall.
Here.
Mayor Matsumoto Wright.
Here?
Councilmember Murray.
Present.
Councilmember Ryan.
Here.
Councilmember Page.
Here.
Councilmember Sonmore. Oh, we can't hear you.
Mute.
I think you're muted.
There we go. Sorry, I have to turn off my other one then. Sorry. Attending remotely via teleconference.
And Councilmember Woodard.
Attending remotely via teleconference.
That concludes roll call.
Thank you. All right, next is public comment. Do we have anyone?
We do. We have Adam Sakay, I think is his last name. Adam, you will have 5 minutes to speak.
Okay, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So my wife and I have been residents of Mountlake Terrace for nearly a decade, and I just want to express my disappointment and quite frankly horror over the flat camera system being approved. It's nothing but a fascist band-aid that completely ignores the root cause of crime in our community. Life becoming increasingly unaffordable due to extreme income inequality. It's a right-wing grift that preys upon people's fear, and I guarantee you it will inevitably be used to harm members of our community. A progressive community like Mountlake Terrace approving this camera system is confusing enough to begin with, but to do so at a time like this is downright shocking. The country is rapidly succumbing to fascism, and our modern-day Gestapo ICE has been working with FLOC and local police forces across the country to terrorize, kidnap, and deport members of our communities. This camera system is nothing but security theater that will actively endanger residents and workers of Mountlake Terrace. It's exactly the sort of thing the city should be taking a firm stand against. It will not make us safer. It itself is the threat. Please ask yourself, if you sign a contract with a company and then immediately need to form an oversight committee in an attempt to prevent that company from disappearing members of the community, isn't that a sign you shouldn't be doing business with that company in the first place? Why go through the trouble of forming a committee and having to continually and defensively monitor a company that's known to be corrupt and dangerous when you can just sever that relationship in the first place? I understand the contract has been signed, but I urge you not to fall prey to the sunk cost fallacy. It's not too late to accept that signing was a mistake and to do the right thing, namely deciding against installing the cameras and telling an evil company like FLOC that they have no place in our town. FLOC can give you all the assurances they want, but the bottom line is that they work with ICE, and ICE is above the law. They will get the footage if they want it and use it against us. It's what they do. The kidnapping and detainment of Mahmoud Khalil and other activists was illegal, but that didn't stop it from happening. Going forward, I'm urging Mountlake Terrace to reconsider its relationship with the idea of providing safety. For some reason, providing safety is heavily associated with monitoring crime, but from a crime standpoint, Mountlake Terrace is actually an incredibly safe place to live. Everyone is so blinded by their focus on a vague idea of crime that they are left vulnerable to actual dangers. Instead of installing the cameras and sinking more money into FLOC, Mountlake Terrace should be protecting its residents from the number one threat to their lives and well-being, the COVID-19 pandemic. Despite the denial and misinformation that's gripping society, the mass disabling event that is the COVID-19 pandemic is ongoing and out of control. We're currently in an escalating wave, and statistically, there are people at this very meeting who will be infected by making the choice to attend in person without wearing an N95 mask. Every single person, including the vaccinated, has a significant chance of developing long COVID, PASC, and silent organ damage from each COVID infection, no matter how mildly or severely the acute phase of the disease presents itself. Why is Mountlake Terrace helping Peter Thiel build a surveillance system instead of addressing this? What if the town provided safety by buying N95s and distributing them to everyone in our community? Why not buy HEPA air purifiers or Bill Corsi cubes for our schools so that kids stop getting constantly reinfected by a disease that frequently leaves them with debilitating health conditions? Did you know that long COVID is now the #1 health condition in children? I ask you why you're spending money and effort on installing a dystopian surveillance system while every day kids and teachers are being shoved unprotected into schools full of a deadly, disabling airborne vascular disease. These things would actually make our community dramatically safer by directly preventing long-term illness, disability, and death. There are so many things the money being allocated to a fascist surveillance system could be used on that would actually improve our community and make it safer from actual threats. I'd like to end on a positive note by thanking Council members Aaron Murray and Steve Woodard for their votes against the surveillance system. Aaron's leadership on this issue has been absolutely vital, and Steve's willingness to listen to the will and concerns of residents has been exemplary. Their actions haven't gone unnoticed by the community, and they're deeply appreciated. Thank you.
No one else has signed up for in-person or remote comments, and written comments were distributed to council.
All right, thank you. So next is the city manager report, except for our city manager is out of town at a conference tonight, and so we're going to have a report next week. Next on our agenda is a presentation on the draft housing action plan with Christy Osborne, our Community and Economic Development Director.
Okay, looks good up there.
Okay.
Great. Good evening, Christy Osborne, Community and Economic Development Director. I have Mackenzie Visser here with me from Echo Northwest, and joining us remotely is Becky Hewitt from Echo Northwest as well. And I'll let Mackenzie go through the presentation, and then we'll answer any questions that you have.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us back. Let's see if the next slide is also, okay, that one's not so blurry. Yeah, so thank you for having us tonight. We are here to talk about the Housing Action Plan now that the Middle Housing Code update has been passed and everything. And so tonight we'll talk about the purpose of the Housing Action Plan, our proposed framework for how we're thinking about it and how we're thinking about prioritizing different actions, how it will be organized, and then a little bit of discussion at the end. So the purpose of the Housing Action Plan is to really take the actions and the goals of the comprehensive plan and turn them into specific actions. One thing to note is that a lot of communities kind of do it the other way around, where they will do like a housing needs assessment and then a housing action plan, and then the goals from that housing action plan kind of become the goals and policies in the comprehensive plan. But because you've already done all of that work for your community, this is great because it's an opportunity for us to really focus on implementation. And this is also an opportunity for us to build on the recent zoning updates and other ongoing and future work that the city is doing. And so just a note on different terms, when we talk about policies, those are the policies that are in the comprehensive plan. When we talk about actions, those are the strategies that we're talking about to achieve those goals that will be in the housing action plan. And then implementation is how and when those actions will move forward. So I'll do my best to be consistent on policy versus action tonight. And just a note that one action can support multiple policies, one policy could require multiple actions, and vice versa. So these are all of the housing element goals and policies. Obviously, there are a lot of them and a lot of work went into all of these. And so like I mentioned earlier, the Housing Action Plan will help identify how and when these policies are enacted and start to organize these into an implementation plan. So given finite resources and capacity, how are we thinking about prioritizing and sequencing this implementation? We're thinking about a framework that can help organize the policies and actions based on feasibility, timing, potential impact, and can also help match the next steps to the city's capacity and priorities that are realities right now. And so this can also help detail how much guidance and what types of information we're providing in the HAP for each action to match to what the implementation steps would be. And so this is an overview of how we're thinking about organizing the different policies that are in the comprehensive plan. We're thinking about, you have projects that have recently been completed, like the Middle Housing Code update, and projects that are ongoing and planned projects. There are also opportunities within the policies to build on that recent and ongoing work. There are policies that advance community priorities that either you all have identified or that the community has identified via all of the engagement that you've been doing and that we've been doing. There are policies that are really centered around different partnerships that the city can build or start a foundation for. And then there are policies that are more about long-term planning and thinking about in the future, in 20 years, over the course of this Vision 2044 comprehensive plan, how are we thinking about getting from point A to point B? And so when we're thinking about prioritizing, where we think that there's the most leverage for action right now is, you have this work that's kind of, it's already in motion. You have work that's going to be over the longer term horizon, but right now you have momentum from this code update and other work that you can leverage right now because it's very recent. There are community priorities that people are identifying as things that they would like to see changed sooner rather than later. And then there are roles and partnerships where it's not necessarily that action needs to be taken tomorrow, but there are ways that you can start building and clarifying those partnerships to lay a foundation for future action, and you can do that sooner rather than later. So I'll kind of walk through how we've started to sort some of these policies. They don't, like some of them will be in different, or in multiple buckets, and some will be in only one, but when we're looking at recent work, the big thing that comes to mind is the Middle Housing Code update, which would primarily support these goal HO1 policies, really talking about housing diversity, innovative housing types, and looking at ways to create more housing opportunities and diverse housing. Looking at upcoming work around like the town center and updating the zoning for the gateway and the neighborhood mixed use, different land designations, like that upcoming work. Those will really support this goal 5 policies that are around mixed use, town center, neighborhood centers, those denser areas in the city, those like neighborhood nodes. And so those are kind of, when you think about goal 1 and goal 5, there are ways that we can leverage those that like items, but also in a lot of ways the momentum is already happening. When we think about building on code changes, we can think about things like policy HO 1.5, develop creative solutions and tools to encourage production of housing. So some of that is covered by the Middle Housing Code update, but also there might be other opportunities to help streamline different procedures or make other updates or changes to promote a more diverse housing stock. Some of the feedback that we heard specifically about this topic is that many participants expressed a lot of support for middle housing, but noted that there are still some barriers, particularly around cost and financing, especially for small or first-time developers. In particular, ADUs were widely supported, and there were a lot of interest in developing an ADU, but there was still some concern that the development process and permitting requirements can sometimes be a little confusing or expensive, again, especially for homeowners who might not have a lot of development experience. And so there were recommendations around just thinking about how to address the complexity or the cost of permitting, but also potential incentives or fee reductions, things like that, that could be explored potentially to help build on those code changes to make sure that like not only is it that the housing is allowed to be built, but also that the city is encouraging it in other ways. So third, we'll talk about some of the policies that we've heard in community priorities, starting with in the comprehensive plan. These are the policies that have some implementation strategies already identified, which we heard were some of the priorities that you all were most interested in, particularly several of the anti-displacement policies had some implementation strategies, and there were quite a few for policy, again, 1.5. These also line up with what we have been hearing from the community and what's reflected in some of the community engagement that was done for the comprehensive plan. One topic in particular that has come up several times is around regulated affordable housing, with participants noting that even with an increased housing stock for a lot of households, the rising household costs can really outpace incomes, and emphasize the need for regulated affordable housing, income restricted housing options, in addition to different types of housing and increasing production, particularly for housing that is underneath or under 80% of the area median income, so really targeting lower income households. But when we talk with developers too, we know that these types of housing are not necessarily something that the market will just be able to deliver. It is kind of a different pro forma that you're looking at, and so without additional incentives, it can be difficult to make those types of housing happen. And so one potential action that we could think about for increasing the stock of regulated affordable housing in Mountlake Terrace is looking at MFTE, which is, it's currently offered in your town center zone, but we can analyze whether or not it would be feasible to potentially expand that program. What types of like limitation or boundaries might you want to put on that expansion? What types of public benefits would you want to ask for? What might the threshold look like, or certain housing types look like that you might want to use it to incentivize? And when we're doing that analysis, we'll also look at both the cost of the program requirements, that would be the impact on the city property tax revenues relative to the benefit of the tax abatement, both in terms of public benefits, but also in terms of whether or not that's an incentive for a developer to build something that they might not otherwise build. Another theme that you all highlighted that has come up several times in community engagement is concerns about displacement. A lot of participants in engagement have expressed being concerned about being priced out or losing neighborhood stability as development increases. Especially noting that there has been a lot of development in Mountlake Terrace, especially with the addition of the light rail station. And so residents felt that the city could be taking proactive steps to help protect particularly lower income residents. There is interest in tools like community land trusts, cooperative ownership, certain tenant protections, as well as protections for, in particular, manufactured home residents. As you can see on this chart here, the green is manufactured homes, and kind of on the far left there, that's the housing, the lowest bucket of household costs for ownership housing. And so those make up the majority of the housing, well, not the majority of housing, but the majority of housing that is available to households earning, or the majority of housing that was sold for less than $300,000. And so it is an option for lower income households to access home ownership. But when we were talking with people, there was some concern about what the code looks like for the manufactured home park designation and mobile home park code, which was last updated in 1994. Some concern about non-conforming units and what that might look like for different repairs, or the ability of residents to like replace or repair their unit as it ages. There was also concern about displacement, just noting that other manufactured home parks in Snohomish County have been bought by new operators in recent years, I think notably in Linwood and one other jurisdiction, but that costs have significantly increased and have priced out many of the residents. And so these are just some of the policies that reflect or support some of those things that I just mentioned. So moving on, talking about partnerships, there could be opportunities for partnerships that could support many of these policies, but these 4 particularly mention partnering with different organizations or regional partners on increasing the supply of housing. A potential action here is being really proactive and intentional about how you build relationships with affordable housing developers to help increase that stock of either housing that supports like certain populations or is deeply affordable or is just, you know, developers who might be interested in doing mixed income developments via MFTE. And so we can talk and we are talking with local and regional providers to really hear what types of things that would be helpful for the city to bring to the table, what might be realistic next steps that the city can take to build trust and improve coordination with those developers, and based on staff capacity, funding constraints, the city priorities and opportunities, what next steps should the city be thinking about taking when it's building a foundation for those partnerships? And so finally, looking ahead, these are just some of the policies that we identified as being longer-term opportunities, particularly Policy 1.1 around encouraging opportunities to meet the population target by 2044, as well as 2.5 and 2.6 about planning for and monitoring housing needs over the 20-year time horizon, as well as advocating at the legislature for trying to expand homeownership options through condominiums, which, as I think we've talked about in previous meetings, there are some things at the state level that could move the needle on feasibility more than perhaps things at the local level. And so with that, when we're thinking about doing the actions and we're working on pulling together all the different types of information that will be provided for each, we're thinking about providing information around why the action's important, what implementation actions and considerations might look like, potential costs, both in terms of like money, but also in terms of staff capacity, what implementation might look like in terms of the city's role or what department might be leading it, what it might look like in terms of time frame, relevant engagement or analysis findings, and the policies that that action would support. And so right now what we're working on is Christy has connected us with several developers and stakeholders, regional partners, and so we're working on connecting with them. We're also doing some analysis around certain actions like MFTE and things like that. And we're drafting potential actions for review and discussion that we'll be bringing to the Planning Commission in September. And so with their feedback and your feedback, we will be refining those actions and really making sure that we're providing all the details that will be helpful and then delivering the final HAP report. This is our tentative timeline currently, and so today we're talking with you all. We met with the Planning Commission 2 weeks ago, July 28th, gave a similar presentation and got their feedback and input on the types of things that they would like to see. And so we'll be bringing them kind of our first draft list of actions in September, and then we'll be doing another work session with them about a month later on the full HAP report. And then we'll be bringing it to you after that in November and then public hearing in early December. And so with that, we would love to hear your feedback. If this seems like the right approach, if there are policies that you didn't hear mentioned that you would like to see prioritized for implementation or that it's important that we dig into, and what types of detail or guidance would be most helpful. Any feedback that you have would be great. Thank you.
All right, do we have anyone with questions? Comments before we get to the Mayor Pro Tem?
I mean, just for what it's worth, I'm always happy to let Brian go first. I will name that I'm excited we are doing this work. So thank you for helping us kind of start this process. I will just admit candidly that I'm not sure that I fully understand the approach. And so maybe we can start there. So when you talk about, one of the goals was to help the city make informed choices about what to implement first based on feasibility, capacity, and community input. Maybe you could summarize how this plan matches next steps to city capacity and priorities, and how that framework fits into that, because I'm not sure candidly that I just even understand that big picture piece to start to ask more, I guess, specific questions.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you for asking. So, yeah, so right now what we're doing, so we're talking with Christy about sort of the things that the city is doing and what might be realistic to do, and then also matching up with the things that we've heard. And so, like, I guess, for example, looking at one of the policies that's about anti-displacement. And so we've heard that that's important. We know some of the things that the city is already doing, and we know maybe some places where there are opportunities for things that are maybe lower hanging fruit. There are also things that could be very effective, but also very expensive or would require a long time to pull together. And so sorting through those things to see what makes sense to do first is kind of what this plan is all about. And so, but across the spectrum of all of the policies. And so some of the policies will be longer term, some of them will be shorter term, but really trying to put in order the city's next steps, particularly over the next like 1 to 3 years.
So the policy will do that, I guess, because we have this framework, but I guess I'm not sure how the framework helps the prioritization. I guess that's where the disconnect is for me. Like, I see that you've kind of grouped the policies and, you know, into different, you know, areas that you've outlined, and I have a question about that. But I guess, how does that help with us getting to a, like, we're going to have a long list of actions? Like, how are we prioritizing those based on this plan and that framework?
Right, okay, yeah, I see. So when we have the actions, we can see which policies they might support, and based on the feedback that has been given about those policies, the actions that really support the policies that we've heard are priorities. Those will be like actions that rise to the top, also depending on which are like more feasible than less. This is also a conversation that we're having with the Planning Commission and you all. Like, at the end of the day, it's your, you know, plan to implement, your comprehensive plan to implement. And so this is also an ongoing conversation around, like, we will bring a list of actions that we think might make sense, how we might think about implementing them, and like what we think might make sense to tackle first based on what we know is coming up for the city in the next 1 to 3 years, talking with Christy about that. And so, but if you say like, no, we really want to start with, you know, focusing on this one policy, like what types of things, what are the actual like steps 1, 2, 3 actions that we need to take to do this policy, then we can take those steps 1, 2, 3 and put those at the top of the list. Does that help?
I think so. So the expectation, my expectation at this point shouldn't be that I have an understanding of how things are going to be prioritized, only that we have established some ways that we think it makes sense to group things to aid in how they are approached together. Is that fair?
Yeah, I noticed Becky's up there too. I think we've done a lot of work on goal and policies, right? We've had the work that was done, excuse me, before the comp plan, where we had economics and housing needs addressed by Leland and Associates. We had the comp plan. So we've got all these goals and all the kind of higher stuff. This is really an attempt to say, okay, based on the goals that we've already identified, what are the actions that we can be taking right now? What are the strategies? So as Mackenzie was saying, there's things we're doing right now that council may not be aware of, but we're working on them every day, right? But we want to make sure you know what those things we are working on. And then there's other things by talking to the development community and the public and going through the comp plan process. We say, hey, we think we can really get some purchase on doing some of these things very efficiently with the staff we have with not a lot of resources. And what those are is like taking a look at expanding the multifamily tax exemption, but bringing that to you and saying, hey, here's what we're thinking, but also giving you more information, which we don't have right now, is what's the economic impact to the city? If we just open that program up, there's a give and take there. manufactured housing, like Mackenzie was saying. We have these existing parks. We very strategically kept them zoned as manufactured housing so they couldn't be bought out like in many communities and redeveloped. But there's still issues with zoning when people want to replace those units. That's something that we can do with zoning. We can do that in-house. Okay, that's something we can do pretty quickly. Building code's going through their process, the International Code Council. There's some building things that are getting pushed that we're tracking, that we're hoping to make those stack flats and some of these other things easier for the development community to build. So do we have our building codes in place to implement that? Are there things in our building code right now that we can do that we cannot require to try to incentivize some of those things that we've heard you folks say and other people in our community, the stacks flats, the cottage housing, the stuff that's not single family or townhomes? Not that that's not making a judgment call. It's all good. But, you know, is there some other things that we can get from that middle housing stuff that we're working on? So we're going to try to bring you additional information. What we're here tonight to say is we have some general ideas. We need to gather some more information to bring back to the Planning Commission and all you folks. Is there something that you would like us to prioritize in doing research and investigating to add to the list of, hey, I really think that this is something that could be in action? Improving our relationships with, you know, different folks in different agencies and the housing folks, and trying to get a housing project here in the city, you know, which we haven't had one in a very long time. Some of those things. So just seeing overall if that seems like that's really what you all intended for us to take this next step. And to me, the next step is implementation. What are we doing and how are we getting there? And what can we do? And really, I look at this as it's a 10-year plan. I mean, you're gonna do another comp plan in 10 years, or somebody is here in the city. I don't know if it's all us, but it's somebody. It's Erin, she'll be here. But you know what I'm saying? So it's just really talking about, really look at it. Here's the next 10 years. And where can we really start to get some traction of, instead of talking about it, what are some of the things that we can do that could help make a difference? That's really what we're talking about here. I hope that helps a little bit more. Besides, I know it's very plannerese and it's taken the goals and policies and, you know, all that stuff that we do. But it really is intended to be based on those goals and policies and those things that we've already heard and what we see. Accessory dwelling units, making sure that we're currently working on those things of where we're getting information put together. So Councilmember Wall comes in and says, I want to put 2 ADUs on my property. I say, bing bong, here you go. Here's a list, a one-stop shop, and we're going to help you get through that process in minimal time and tell you everything you need to know to do that, because we know that a lot of people have asked about accessory dwelling units. Those are the things where it's like, hey, I think we can gain purchase rather quickly to do some of these things that can help, truly help people try to get to an affordability in some capacity. Some of the other things are going to be where you guys are going to be telling us, because it's going to involve financial obligations. Mm-hmm. And that's where you guys have to weigh in to say, well, this is what our priority is as council, and this is what we would like to do as far as that goes. There's other things that we can do that are really cost effective to start out, though.
Thank you. No, I appreciate all of the additional context, Christy. And I guess I'm excited for what, I mean, I think it goes back to where I started.
Yeah, sure.
When I was excited about a housing action plan, I'm excited to learn more about what some of those specifics are and to continue to develop that. I guess I did have a question just around, so you had 5 categories, I think, that you had grouped the policies into. And I guess I'm curious about not focusing on the last one, which was the long-term, no, back further. There you go. Nope, that was it.
Right here?
Yep. So, yeah, 5, right? Okay. So the framework categories. I guess I heard, and correct me please if I'm not following, but so I heard that there was kind of a thought that we would focus on those middle 3. And I guess I want to just challenge that a little, because the plan for future updates, if we are not starting those long projects now, then they're never going to happen. And so actually, if you could go down to the next, like the policies specifically that impacted, and I don't have that right up in front of me, but I mean, I think those are really important things for us to be, I mean, they should be really the foundation of what we're doing, right? So maybe we're not actively focusing on them, but I don't think, I think they inform the rest of the work that we do, right? We're doing all of these other things because we want to ensure that we are meeting our population targets, and because, you know, we want to plan and monitor housing needs at all income levels, you know, like, so it feels like that is actually first step maybe versus, so maybe it's not an active ongoing focus in the way that some of these other things are, but it feels like that should be informing how we go about prioritization of some of this other work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that's why we identified all of the policies that we recently adopted, because that is our framework. But I get your point. So maybe it's more of, are these generally the 5 categories? And from those 5 categories, maybe what do we want to focus on a couple out of each category?
Sure.
And we can definitely do that instead, right? Not to say like, hey, and that's why we're here. I mean, so you let us know. I know some of you work in, you know, housing and these things all the time. So, you know, we're here to truly ask for your input to make sure as we're framing this up, it's what you've asked for and what you're intending to see at the end of this process.
Awesome. Well, then I will just give 2 thoughts and then I will stop talking because I'm sure others have thoughts as well. But I appreciate, as somebody who does not work in housing, I appreciate you trying to help bring me along in the process, and hopefully as a byproduct, maybe help bring others along who also had questions. But so I guess point of feedback, and I mean, maybe a question, maybe just a, so under our goal of promote housing development near town center, mixed use, and neighborhood centers, that was, you had indicated in kind of a like little note on it that the upcoming town center code update will support those policies. I guess I would just make sure that as part of that, we're not forgetting about the other part of that, the mixed use and neighborhood centers part of that. I think it's really important that those folks are included in this work, and that our community is collectively included in this work. And so I guess I just want to make sure that there is a plan to focus on those policy goals with actionable steps outside of just the town center update, because that obviously won't incorporate some of those other areas of the community.
Yeah, and that's the work we're doing actually as we speak. So that work's going to be done before we take a look at town center again. So those neighborhood areas, because even though we realistically need to take just a look at town center and just make sure that everything's working as intended, and we don't, you know, what we need to update. The neighborhood nodes is really our focus right now for that second part of our zoning, the gateway area, Terrace station, and redevelopment down there, and then those nodes of building around those. So you'll actually be seeing that next. So maybe we're not explaining that as well as we need to be, but yeah, we've got a few things up in the air. And like Mackenzie said, maybe they're not in atypical order, but, you know, with the requirements for when we needed to have things adopted by the state, and then the middle housing, of course, that took priority. But this does give us a chance to maybe do a housing action plan a little bit different, which is really focusing on what's the action, which I think a lot of times our comprehensive planning kind of misses. You know, we talk big, and that's great. We need to have a vision. but we also, the rubber needs to hit the road at some point, and we need to, implement what we're talking about. So I think it's good.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think we've spent a lot of time talking about like supply. And I guess one of the things I was excited about when we started talking about the housing action plan originally was kind of looking at that stability and
Right.
subsidy part of things, right? So the anti-displacement measures, the how do we create more subsidized housing, those sorts of things that we haven't, I think, spent as much time on as we have
Right.
some of the supply issues. And so excited to hear more and just appreciate all of the work and look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Page.
Thank you. I guess I got just 2 points of interest right now, and it starts with, the principles that are involved in the discussions that you're having, other than us and maybe the planning committee, those outside of, that circle. And it would be nice as you move forward in conversation with us to get a glimpse of where they think the priorities are realistic, and because they're the ones that's going to have the boots on the ground. And, what do they think about, where the priorities should be in relationship to where we think the priorities should be and what direction it should be going in, because we may not be on the same foot track. And I know you're having that conversation, probably getting that advice or just, that piece from them, but it'd be good to kind of give us a feel for, where we are, because, we're having a conversation about like what we can do right now or in the very, very near future. And I agree that the second part of it is, we should not forego those plans for future updates. But what I really think about that is that, if that 10-year plan, we should be looking at whatever it is that we're doing or think we should be, or whatever we decide we should be doing, really should be because it is an if, then this. It's going to be the cause, and this is going to be the effect, and that effect is the 10-year thing. So that's where, in my mind, we're constantly talking about the 10-year update or the 20-year plan, because what's happening here is going to affect this, which is going to affect this, which is going to build to that. Because we're not going to get there if we're not doing this. But this shouldn't happen if it's not going to affect that, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Anyone else before we go on to Mayor Pro Tem? I don't see any hands coming up, so it's yours.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, thank you. I am so thrilled we're doing this. As many of you know, I've been asking for this for a long time, and which gets to your point. We're doing it a little different approach, but I'm actually excited about this approach. The typical approach is having a housing action plan and then developing your comprehensive plan policies, which was my original intention looking for this a few years ago. But I like the approach, and I guess to kind of get back to Councilmember Murray's original question, because of that difference, because we're doing it with a little different approach, I kind of equate it to what the process we went through with the economic vitality strategy, where there are specific actions and a work plan, a timeline, prioritizing, taking into account costs and, everything and building around that. So I see that's what we're doing here with the housing action plan is kind of our housing strategy, a 5 to 10 year strategy for what we're going to do to be able to implement our policies in the comprehensive plan, the goals and policies in the comprehensive plan that we developed, which was also very comprehensive. I think we did a great job. You all did a great job. We did a great job. The community did a great job in developing our overall comprehensive plan, and particularly the housing element of the comprehensive plan to help inform what we need to do and the direction we need to go to address the priorities in our community. So having said that, let me bounce around. I'm actually going to probably hit on a lot of things that you touched on, but I look at kind of have a different framework in my mind of how I approach dealing with housing and economic development. And that's and so I'm going to touch on a number of things that you've hit on in different ways or different areas, but I'll try and expand on some of those. So in general, I look at the development process as three key components. One is the policy, the next is the process, and the third is the personnel. So looking at the policy, that's the development regulations, the zoning, the code, the development codes, the zone, all the different pieces that we adopt as policy. So the ADUs and cottage housing, middle housing, all of those are pieces of the policy that we put in place that we have to work around and that we're implementing, right? So from that standpoint, I think when we look at the outline that you've put in place, some of the key areas we need to focus on a little bit longer term, because we just adopted new middle housing codes that made some changes to the ADUs and the cottage housing, right? And we just adopted the new neighborhood nodes. And so part of what we need to do is the monitoring, right? And making sure that those things that we put in place are right. I mean, so we were, going back 20 years, I mean, we were ahead of the curve on housing and adopting ADUs and cottage housing way ahead before everybody else did. But that also meant that we had some problems with what we put in place. And we did the best we could with the knowledge we had, but we learned from that. And we learned that there are ways to improve what we adopted. And so that's what we've done with this last round. But now that we've adopted it, we need to see how it plays out, right? We need to see the feedback that we're getting when somebody's coming in with their ADU application or their cottage housing application, and say, okay, here's where the problems are, and this is where we need to update the policy to make sure that we're getting the result that we ultimately wanted to get. So that's piece number one, is on the policy front, we want to make sure that we're updating what we've put into place to make sure we're getting the results. Number two is the process. So that's the permitting process, the process that people have to go through once they've submitted their application. And we've been doing a lot of work there too. Again, a lot of it behind the scenes, but we're kind of remotely aware as a council and the public that it's happening. But there's another area where we don't hear the feedback through that process, right? So that's where we've been doing a lot of great work and working in the development community to make sure that we're smoothing that out and improving that process. But that's a continual, listening, learning, updating, and improving that process that's in place to be able to help move things through the process quickly in a timely fashion. And then the third is personnel, and that's, again, I know we've been working on that, and we generally have the can-do, let's get to yes attitude, let's make this work. It's basically a regulator versus a facilitator, somebody that's going to regulate and basically stop people from moving through the process, from getting things developed until this exact code is met a certain way based on their perspective, right? And so, everybody has their own perspective of what that code actually means. And so part of that is us as personnel in our staff getting to yes, working with the development community to say, okay, we need to facilitate to help you through this process and get this product built, because that's our end goal. Is we want to increase the supply. We want to make these things more affordable. So how do we do that? We do that through the policy process and the personnel all working together in sync to make things a reality, right? So that's just kind of an overall bottom line, is we're trying to remove barriers. Yeah. So identifying what those barriers are in each of those different ways, in each of those three key areas, and figuring out what do we need to do to remove those barriers to get to yes and make things happen. So ultimately, supply and diversity and choices is our number one key, I think, the absolute, because that drives everything else. From affordability to accommodating growth and meeting the housing targets. It's all about supply and making sure we have a variety of choices available to meet all demand for what people are looking for when they're looking for housing, a roof over their head. So ultimately, it's about that. In that, there's a couple of key areas. So we talk about affordability. One of the key things that we need to be expanding, and one of the things we're learning is in huge short supply, is home ownership opportunities for first-time buyers, for entry-level buyers. that is almost non-existent in Snohomish County right now. And so that is a key area that has to be an absolute priority that we need to really focus on, figuring out how do we get home ownership opportunities, because I don't remember during one of my reports from, one of many bodies that I serve on, we have, and I don't have my notes now to be able to explain it properly, but, we have not only a huge shortage of supply overall, but what is being built is for the upper level of housing, right? You're not seeing the entry-level homes being built. So that's a huge shortage there. The other problem is rental opportunities. When it comes to rental opportunities, what's being built is 1 bedroom, maybe 2 bedroom. We're not seeing affordable housing, rental housing for a growing family, right? So that's another area that we should take a look at, is figuring out how do we deal with home ownership for entry-level buyers particularly. How do we expand opportunities for renters with growing families? So then we start to talk about, in the affordability range, we start talking about subsidized housing. So that's an area that is very challenging because there's just not enough money to be able to build enough homes to be able to get to where we need to be to provide the housing or ensure that the housing is available for the lower income. So that's going to obviously hits on the community partnerships and working out and reaching out and working together closely with groups like HASCO and Housing Hope, and particularly you should be aware of what we're working on here at the South County region as a regional collaboration. In fact, our next meeting in September is going to be really delving into this, is working together as a South County region to solve that problem, to try and find opportunities. And we're going to have HASCO and Housing Hope and others, working together with Snohomish County Human Services, and which brings me to another thing that we want to make sure that we're looking at is the HART report. The Snohomish County HART report, which is the Housing Affordability Regional Task Force that was done years ago. We're bringing that back through Snohomish County tomorrow and going to be making that a priority. The goals that we had adopted back in the day.
Nothing has changed in there. It's still.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so we're bringing that back, and we're going to start monitoring and implementing the report, the goals that were adopted in that report. So we need to take a close look at that and be working together with the county and the South County region to be able to figure out how do we address some of those key areas. Speaking of other groups that we want to be reaching out to, obviously, and you've mentioned it, is none of this matters if it's not feasible, right? If it doesn't pencil out. So we need to be working together with our local builders, the master builders, the realtors. I would encourage you to reach out to particularly Mike Appleby as a great resource to be able to really look through and understand, codes and the impact and how it affects the development community. So all of those. And then another key thing that we need to be thinking about from those that are trying to pencil things out is financing is a real challenge. Yeah. Trying to figure out how, for the bigger projects, particularly in the town center, how do we work with a development community that is trying to figure out how to get financing from outside sources, from the investors that have the money to be able to finance their project. So figuring out, working with the development community that are looking at those bigger projects in town center, what do they need? What kind of incentives do we need to be looking at to be able to help them obtain the financing to be able to make the projects come to fruition? So I'm sure I have more, but I'll stop there. I
was great. Thank
really
you.
appreciate you guys doing this, and I'm really excited about where we're going with this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful. I think, yeah, a lot of that is on our radar. You definitely gave us a few more leads to chase down. We'll reach out to Mike Appleby, and yeah, a lot of the groups that you mentioned, we have emails out to. I met with Hasco last week, actually, and so, yeah, we're trying to talk to everyone, and yeah, appreciate the feedback.
Let me know if you need help.
Thank you.
So I think that there are still 4 manufactured housings for sale in Mountlake Terrace right now, and it's sitting there. One is $80,000, and it's not moving. So I'm just wondering if it's the cost of the pad, the rent for the pad in there, because we zone the manufactured home communities to manufactured homes so that no one can buy it and kick everybody out and build
Right.
a big building there. But here's one of the things we didn't think about. They are raising the pad rents to the point where it's almost unaffordable, which is what's happening with condominiums right now. The older condominiums, the prices are going down, but the whole homeowners association dues are going up.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Yeah.
$500, $600, $700, $1,000 a month for HOA dues. And that's not what we'd call affordable housing.
Yeah.
So these are some of the unintended consequences that we have to start talking about. Because we want more condominiums. We want more people being able to afford manufactured homes, even at $80,000, you know, $80,000. But when I see them just sitting there not getting purchased, I'm just wondering what's going on, what really is. I know you can't get financing for a lot of manufactured houses, but, and a lot of people just, they sell their house and then they buy a manufactured home, all cash. But if that's not happening, people are still not buying that for some reason. You know, it just kind of worries me. So it's something that we can look into, because if we're going to be building, well, we can't build any more manufactured housing areas, but condominiums, ADUs, you know, what is, because this is so new for all of us, you know, what happens if we put in 20 ADUs and then all of a sudden we didn't think of something that happened?
Can I ask a question? So one of my thoughts, I guess, has been that we look to, Hasco and others have looked to converting like hotel motels types for housing. But are you guys aware, because you can put manufactured housing in any zone in the state of Washington, right? In any residential zone. Has anybody in the area ever looked at doing manufactured home type of development as affordable housing, which you could control exactly what you're saying, the cost of the pad, but it gives an opportunity for entry into...
You mean that you buy it fee simple?
Yeah, I mean, you could absolutely do it as a fee simple, but it's, you know, regulated in such a manner is you're controlling those costs for the pad, and it's that entry-level stepping stone for affordable housing.
We have Wandering Creek right there in Bothell,
Okay.
on our side of Bothell.
Okay.
That's a manufactured housing development that is a fee simple. You buy the piece of property, but they're not that affordable anymore.
Yeah, and I think I've ran into that. Is it pretty fairly large or? Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. Yeah, because I've thought that could be a way of, instead of building, you know, multifamily or something else, you hear a lot of people, or at least back when some of us were coming up, where, you know, my first home, I bought a manufactured home, and that was my entry into purchasing something, and then, you know, I was able to kind of move from there. Like we're saying, is where is the entry-level home price for somebody to actually even get their foot in the door anymore, to then parlay that to, oh, now we can sell this and, you know, kind of go from there. We can build equity where there's just not opportunity to build equity. So, yeah, I think we need to do some more research on that. But just, yeah, looking for different ways of how you can get people into housing where they're building equity in some form that's somewhat affordable for people besides, hey, $750,000, you know, type of thing, right?
Unfortunately, with manufactured homes, you're not really building a lot of equity.
Yeah,
Because it's like
got it.
buying a car. A car loses its value when you drive off the lot.
Sure.
And manufactured homes are almost the same way. You do gain equity. They are going up in price, but not like a single family.
Sure, sure.
And there are other, the Hasco-owned manufactured home areas, they try to really, really control their pad rent and keep it affordable,
Yeah,
but not everyone can do that.
right, sure. Yeah, there's real cost, so.
Anyone else up there? I don't see any hands going up. Do you have anything more?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, just kind of playing off of that, that was the one thing that I didn't touch on is the anti-displacement and related to manufactured mobile homes particularly. But that, anti-displacement is important and it's a priority. It's also a challenge with a growing community, right? So
Right.
trying to balance that and figure
Yeah.
out how do we increase supply while ensuring that we aren't displacing those that are in need. And so, so I think that part of that is looking into our mobile home parks and the zones that we have, and are there some additional protections there that we can look at or consider? Another part of it is potentially, looking at the community land trusts, working together with Hasco and community land trusts, and potentially, doing communities with, some of the tiny homes and the boxable, box homes that are,
Right.
so affordable. I mean, you can get a box home now for like $20,000 because you still have to find a place to put it and connect it to the utilities and all of that, which are additional charges.
Would that be ADUs?
And it could be used potentially at ADUs too. So it's just, looking into the tiny homes and the boxable type homes that are out there as a product. And, we have experience in Everett as a community that's been working with that on one hand. I think a couple of other communities in Jefferson County, I think it was, or anyway, have some experience actually working with that, but maybe, getting creative and combining, working with the Hascos and nonprofits that might be able to help utilize community trusts to be able to put in place in zoning for certain places that can expand, and have protections. Anyway, it's just, I think trying to figure out, and then bottom line is we're going to have to get creative to figure out how to do both displacement and supply and affordability. So let's get creative.
Yeah.
We don't have a Snohomish County Land Trust. They were trying to get one put together, but I think we're one of the few counties that don't have one.
Is that the, I'm trying to remember,
And
the HH?
it would, I know Whatcom County has, is it Whatcom
Holmes.
County? Or
Homes and Hope Community Land Trust?
is that in Snohomish County?
It is.
Is that Kim, what's her, I think they were trying to put the one together, but is that a big one?
I actually sent them a message via their, contact us portal, because there wasn't any actual contact information on the website, asking if they could chat with me, so I will let you know if they respond. But that is the only group that I have seen that's doing
Okay.
community land trust in Snohomish County, and I don't know the extent to which they're doing that.
Because it would be nice if someone could come in and tell, give a report to the council what a land trust is and how it works. Councilmember Murray?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the continued conversation. I met her, other executive director, at one of the community fairs here not too long ago, so I have her information if that is helpful.
That would be
I'll
great.
send that over to Christine.
Thanks. Yeah,
That
absolutely.
would be really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see anyone else's hand up. Anyone else with any comments, or did you have more?
No, me,
Oh.
it's okay.
Because I don't want to cut
You
it
know
off
where to
or something.
find us.
All right. Okay, well, we have lots of ideas, so.
All right. Thank you
Thank you so
all.
much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, next is our city attorney, Hillary Evans, here to talk about refresher training on Open Public Meetings Act and Public Records Act. Yes. Okay, shall we do a 5-minute break?
Oh, I forgot to get my Coke out of there.
Oh, my. All right, we're going to be back at 8:15. All right, we're back in session, and we have our city attorney, Hillary Evans, ready to go. That's
Good
already
evening,
dead.
Council. I am here to teach you a little bit about public records and the OPMA. I understand that you do have regular training on it, but it's never good. It's never bad to have a refresher on this kind of thing. And, you know, I don't want to jinx it. You've been, I'm not even going to say it. Hopefully you won't ever have to use this information. But let's get into it. Okay, the Public Records Act. Some of this will be a refresher. It was adopted in '72. It's been amended by the legislature and discussed by the courts extensively since then. Of all the states I've ever heard of, it is the most strongly worded mandate for broad and public disclosure of public records I've ever heard of all the sunshine
Sorry, we
laws.
can't hear on the.
Really? Is it that I'm just really quiet?
Oh, there you are.
Okay.
Now we can hear you.
I'll
Thank
get
you.
really close to the mic. Of all the sunshine laws, Washington seems to be the most robust, and the courts certainly support that. It mandates full access to information concerning the conduct of government on every level, certainly including municipalities. The purpose is to keep public officials and institutions accountable, and whenever you have a coin toss, the PRA favors disclosure. What is a record? It is any writing, and that includes electronic writings, and it includes voicemails that are prepared, owned, used, or retained by the government. So obviously, things that you would prepare in the course of your duties or responsibilities make sense that that would be a public record, but things that have been used or even just things that have been retained. My favorite example is a Post-it note, like your Subway order, your Starbucks order, and you keep it on your desk. It is being retained by the government entity, and therefore it is a public record potentially. Probably transitory, but it still counts. So one of the things that confuses a lot of people and doesn't get enough airtime is production versus disclosure. When we get a public records request, we collect every responsive record. A lot of those records are privileged. A lot of those records will have exemptions. Maybe they'll have social security numbers. I spoke to an attorney recently who was contracting with this city, and he was like, well, I won't have to give you any of my documents because they're all attorney-client privileged. And I said, no, you have to produce all of those documents to me. We're not necessarily going to disclose them all, but the city's PRO needs to collect all of the records, whether or not they're exempt, and we are going to review them, and then if we find information in them that is exempt, we will redact those, and we have to put them in a log, and that is exactly what our logs look like. So when we find, we have to Bates number, we have to create a series of numbers for all of the redacted documents, and then we identify what the document is. If it's an email, it's who it's to from, the date, the time sent, and then we have to provide a redaction code or the RCW for why we're redacting that specific piece of the document. Generally, we don't withhold entire documents. I can't think of any time I've ever withheld an entire document. Usually we provide the document with little bits of redaction throughout. So when we collect the documents, it's important that you don't do your own review of what is confidential or privileged or private. That's what the PRO does. And an agency has to conduct an adequate search. It has to consider the formats. It has to consider past officials, past employees, all the possible locations, and the expansive nature of the internet has made this incredibly difficult to track down. We all have mobile phones, we all have surfaces, we all have access to our city email on various devices. So it's a very, very large area that our PROs have to search on a regular basis. And it has to be reasonably calculated to uncover responsive records, meaning it has to be defensible. Yes, and please jump in. I should have said that at the outset.
This is the second time I've heard or seen the word responsive. So does that mean that if there is no response to the initial communication, then it doesn't fall under this category?
Such a good question. I have so much to say. So what we need to do is there are so many very clear-cut requests that come in. I want all of Councilmember Murray's emails. Okay, so all responsive documents are easy. We would just grab all of her emails. We would ask her to search her personal device for any work emails. If she didn't have them, she would fill out an affidavit, and we'll go into that in a second. It's much harder when it's a 3-pager, handwritten, or sometimes expressed verbally. I'd like records that talk about like housing and development in the city. What is responsive to that? And so our PRO has the ability to try and clarify, but not all requesters respond to those clarification requests. So a responsive document is anything that would fall into the category of what they're requesting. And then our search has to be defensible in that way. So very easy to defend all emails from individual A. But when we're talking about something, I want records related to housing and development. Okay, the request is clarified. Going how far back? No response. So we have to start from the beginning of time and come up with search terms and locations and individuals who would be able to help us identify it, such that if we were to be sued for failing to provide a responsive record, we could defend that search pattern. And that's really Rebecca's and Marlena's job, is to create searches with IT that are defensible, that we can say, no, we didn't expect that document to be under the table over there. We did these great searches. We should have gotten everything. We apologize that we didn't capture everything. So a responsive record is, somewhat subjective in that way. And if we fail to do an adequate search, it's effective as a denial. So when you like a search that says something like, I want documents related to the comprehensive plan for this year, and should we fail to search hard files, fail to go to people's desks and open their drawers and see if Christy has any notes that she's taken in meetings, every single one of those pages is a denial of the records request, and we'll get dinged for those. So another thing that is confusing and important is knowing what metadata is. Hopefully you've heard the term before. It's data about data. It is imperative that we give that when it's requested. So what does that mean? If you have a Word document and it says, hi, my name is Hillary on it, the record speaks for itself, but the metadata is the date I created it, whether or not I used red lines and accepted them, who might have edited them. There's so much that you can find out about an electronic record these days, especially things like Excel spreadsheets. I'm sorry, I forgot. I need to be close. Sorry, online council members. That all of that information needs to be gathered, collected, which is why frequently if we ask you for your documents and you send us all PDFs, which, you may or may not do, but that's happened to me where I ask a client for documents and instead of Word documents or emails, they send me all PDFs or they print them out and give it to me, which is not sufficient because if the individual wants it in its native format, whatever format it was created in, whether that's PST for an email or a Word doc for a Word document, they may be looking for that metadata and they can probably harvest a lot more than we understand. It is required that we produce that. PROs have to follow every lead, which we have two of the most chipper and charming PROs I've ever met. It is a wonderful personality style to have because they are constantly harassing people and that's their job, is to harass with a smile. They have to be like detectives. They have to follow obvious leads as they're uncovered. They have a continuing duty to follow those leads. We always advise, and especially I as the lawyer who's not doing the search, to make everything over-inclusive rather than under-inclusive. You want to use those exclamation points at the end of your Boolean searching. There's this terrible case where a PRO misspelled the name. So the request asked for the records related to a name that was spelled wrong in the request. And the PRO ran the request with the misspelling as was requested, not correcting the search. And the city was penalized because she didn't say to herself, well, this looks like an error. I should probably search for both the erroneous name and the correct name, which is, I think, very unfair, but the courts would disagree. So they have to apply their brain in every move they make in all of these searches. And then we document those searches to defend against potential litigation. Okay, what are the penalties?
Harsh.
Yeah, extensive, expensive. $100 a page a day. So there's one case in Eastern Washington, itty bitty town. The entire budget was something like $1 million a year. City of Mesa, something like that. Zinc versus Mesa, I think is the case. Anyways, they were penalized in one case, 1/3 of their annual operating budget, and it was upheld. It effectively bankrupted the city because if you get a lot of pages for a lot of days, it adds up very, very quickly. So you have to do a good job. The statute of limitations on these cases are 1 year. So a lot of requesters who are very good at what they do will wait until 360 days go by before they sue so that they can collect all of the days for all of the missing pages, which is smart. I mean, that's how you make the money doing this. And people do make a lot of money doing this. So as council members, what is your obligation? There is no statutorily required format for a request. So no one has to say, I'm making a public records request under the PRA right now. People can email them to you, ask them of you, use the city's form or not. There is an entire group of individuals right now who, if you Google them on YouTube, you'll have a full evening of colorful entertainment. And their entire mission in life is to walk up to people at front desks at municipalities and counties and districts and say, I want to see your public records log. And you know, poor Joe Schmo sitting at the counter may or may not even know what that is. I want to make a public records request. I want to see all these things. And it is an error not to respond to that in 5 days as a public records request. Our PROs have to respond within 5 days to all records requests. So the right thing for the front desk person to do is say, hey, would you write that down for me? But they don't have to. So the front desk person has to write it down, get their information. If they don't give you their contact information, you can't respond with records, but they'll usually just scream out an email address that makes no sense. And that's a valid public records request. So it's good for you. I mean, it is very rare that a council member will be the recipient of a public records request, but keep your ear open. I would not like to be the test case for a citizen or a resident who comes up to you and says, you know, I'd really like to see all your emails. And then you laugh and you ignore it. And 364 days later, we get sued. I think it's defensible, but keep your ear open. And if you ever have concerns that what you're being asked for might constitute a public records request, shoot me or Rebecca or Jennifer an email and we can take it from there. The best practice is to follow up with them in writing and say, did you just make a public records request? If so, here's the form, but they don't have to adhere to that. So just something to be cognizant of. You want to contact the PRO, she'll coordinate the requests. One thing that I get asked a lot is what happens if a city finds a document after we've already provided the response. We should notify the requester in writing immediately and explain. This has happened to cities that I represent. I was aware of significant public records requests on an issue because I was going to trial on that issue. And a new person walked into a new office and opened up one of the books on their shelf and opened it right to a page that was relevant to the lawsuit I just told him about. And the public records requests that had been associated with that lawsuit. And boy, it was shocking. So we had to immediately tell the requester that we had found this record. It was in a place no one could have expected. It was literally a 50-year-old journal. that should have been thrown away many, many years ago. But since we had retained it, it was a public record and it was responsive. So it was okay that our search hadn't captured it, it turns out, but we still had to produce it immediately. A big question, oh, yeah.
Can you define retained
Oh, that's
elevator speech?
whole training. Washington State has this massive retention guideline online. And depending on what the document is, there is going to be a different retention value for it. It can be 6 years, it can be 30 days. Closed caption footage is 30 days. Anything related to a lawsuit is 6 years. Police have their own, fire department have their own. You can Google it and read it, and it will put you right to sleep. It is hard to remember, and I recently gave city departments cheat sheets, but still don't, my advice was, here's some cheat sheets, but don't rely on these. You need to go back to the website because it changes, and it's based on the content of the record. It's not as simple as all emails or a year, and all paper records or 2 years. It's wildly unpredictable. So, great question that I can't really answer. Yeah.
Which is why it's important to probably conduct all of your business on city email and your city phone, because the city has all of that information. So if you do any business, any city business on your personal devices, that means you are responsible for retaining that information. Whereas if your business is conducted on the city stuff, laptop, et cetera, then the city has access to it, so you don't have to retain it personally.
Yep.
But but anything personal gets in, then you have to know what retain means.
Yep.
And as long as we're getting into like the granular details, I mean, so I have assumed that like, so when we're talking about city email, for instance, that I can delete an email in my like inbox that exists on my computer, because I assume that IT is retaining those records in some way, but I guess I feel like I should now ask that question and make sure that that assumption is accurate.
I would not advise you to do that.
Okay.
Unless you, okay, so here's the shortcut is a document that is transitory could and should be deleted immediately. A transitory record is probably something you've heard of, but it is meet me at the car, I can give you a ride home. It is when is lunch. It is that meeting happened yesterday or 3 days ago. It is the auto, I'm sure you get AWC and MRSC and all those sorts of like subscriptions that come in. When Mark Rowe was the county prosecutor, he got tons of public records requests, and he had subscribed to Seattle Times, Everett Herald, Mariners. So people would request for all of Mark Rowe's emails, and we would be just unloading thousands of spam emails on them. And it was hard for them to search, but it was also hard for us to produce. So delete transitory records immediately. Double delete them. When they go into your inbox, when they go into your deleted bin, delete the deleted bin. Get rid of them, purge them. You don't have them, they're not public records anymore. Unfortunately, some of the records you might get probably have retention value that's longer than a backup tape would be. So if you would find it useful, I could make you a cheat sheet for retention, or I could do a training on retention. We do have backups, but they're not foolproof, and it's certainly easier to search records in your inbox than they would be otherwise.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think some additional guidance there would be really helpful, because I will say, I mean, I don't hard delete anything, but I assume like it goes and lives in my outbox, and I actually don't know what our automatic kind of deletion, like how IT has set that up. So yeah, I think making sure that we understand how that's being navigated.
There are levels. There are levels of diligence with regard to retention. The city of Kirkland, when you work there, you get your Outlook, and it autofills with a ton of folders on the side of your inbox that say 6-year retention, 3-year retention, and whenever you're done with an email, you drag and drop it into that folder, which is a really lovely way to ensure you're retaining records long enough, but is really complicated to learn what you're supposed to drag and drop on day one, right? You're learning your job. So I personally have folders that I drag and drop into so that I'm sure I keep things long enough. And I have, because I do some litigation, I have things that need to be kept really long time, longer than you otherwise would. So it just depends on how granular you do want to get into it, but I'd be happy to provide like a cheat sheet or at least give you the link to the state retention database.
I want to be as granular as I need to be compliant. So that is the guidance that I would appreciate. And I will just name, like, I know when I started on council, one of the issues I ran into was mailbox limits. So we had very small mailbox limits, which created issues around that, which again is why I assumed that there must be some like accounting of those emails elsewhere. And so I guess helping to understand what IT has and like if I can just archive everything versus delete, like that's great. Like, I guess, so some best practices on how we ensure that we are doing what we need to do on our side, because I don't necessarily understand fully how IT does the things they do on their side would be awesome.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. I'm glad I asked.
Good suggestion. And, you know, inadvertently deleting your entire inbox, for example, is not something you're probably going to get penalized for. Now, don't go and inadvertently delete your inboxes, but it's happened before where an entire city crashes or, you know, a more senior member of the team accidentally deletes an entire file. I've seen it happen before, and you're not going to get dinged for that. If you're in good faith preserving what you think you have to preserve and things get deleted as you think that's necessary, the odds of you being financially penalized or sued for it are slim to none, but it is good to know, right? So I hear that. Another question I get asked a lot is, are my personal emails or documents considered public records? Again, you have to, this is like such an amazing decision tree, so just wait for the graphic. But essentially, you want to ask yourself, are they personal in content? If they're personal in content and on your personal device, they're personal. Are they personal in content and on a city device? Then they are probably public records. If they are city related and on your personal device, they are still city records. If they are city related and on your city device, they are definitely city records. And my decision tree is much more complex than that, but that is essentially the gist of it. You can't really protect things that are city related by talking about them on your own Facebook or in your own DMs. They will still be considered public records if they are unearthed. So you want to ask yourself, like, are they relating to city business? And if so, you probably should keep them in city, you know, in the city framework. So you've got city phones, you've got a city voicemail. Try and keep the city stuff with the city and the personal stuff personal. It's harder to do because I know, especially in your roles, people reach out to you personally because they know you personally and they want to talk about city stuff because they know you're on council. The best practices there is to, and I'm sure you all do this, forward that to your city email and respond from the city email and remind them to please use your city email if they don't have it already. It's annoying, but that's the right way to do it. And that way we do keep a copy of that. So this is the law or the whack on it. A record showing the existence of a purely personal email sent by an agency employee would probably still be a public record if it's even if the contents of the email itself were not. It's frustrating, but there you have it. So keep things separate. And this is why the courts invented the Nissen affidavit. And I made all staff guess these, and I want to see. I think they're pretty legible. Who've we got here signing?
Chuck Norris.
Yep.
Elvis Presley, Britney Spears, Megan.
Morgan. Yeah, exactly. You know, I needed a good variety. So you've all, I think, recently been introduced to the concept of a Nissen affidavit. And basically what it means is, what it does is it gives an elected generally, usually, or a director, an opportunity to say, I have a Gmail, I have a Facebook, I have a LinkedIn, I only ever use them for personal stuff. In fact, I searched all of those accounts and I didn't find any city stuff. Therefore, you're not getting any records from me from those accounts. And it's a really slick way of holding you accountable to search your own devices. What we don't want to do is have enough crossover that IT has to grab your personal cell phone and go through texts with you. So if you keep things separated, those NISN affidavits are very easy to write. If you don't, they're very complicated to write. And in fact, this was borne out recently in the city of Sammamish. If you ever start to get paranoid about keeping things separate, this is an amazing case. The city of Valderrama versus city of Sammamish. There were 43 NISN affidavits. It was like council members suing former council members suing present council members for conspiracies, and people were texting on the dais, and I want all of this. I mean, they were looking for everything. This thing took years. The searching took years. And some former council members were unwilling to sign NISN affidavits, were unwilling to do searches. It was incredibly chaotic. But the moral of the story is that we should all be trained to both divide our personal and professional lives, or in your case, your personal lives and your council member lives, because you also probably have professional lives. And we need to know that that what you may ultimately be asked is to sign an affidavit saying that you don't. And if you do, you're going to have to identify, yes, I use my Gmail sometimes for city business, and here's how I searched it. And then that opens a whole can of worms. So it turns out much better to sign the NISN affidavit with great detail rather than refuse to do so. It's another thing that came out of this case. What are exemptions to public records? All records are presumed open. If a record or part of a record is withheld, we have to cite to the exemption. That's the log I showed you earlier. They are very narrowly construed, and we have to just redact that little bit that's exempt. There's no general privacy exemption in the PRA, and exempt records are determined by the PRO. And the thing that usually surprises a lot of people who are new to city business or government in Washington is that there's no general privacy exemption. So you can say, my daughter had a fever of 103 last night. I can't make it to the council meeting, and that is a record that will go out the door unredacted. People say HIPAA, and I say it doesn't apply. It is very uncomfortable. So again, the takeaway is don't put anything in a city record that you wouldn't want anyone to know, or they will not everyone to know. We can't redact that. We can redact your social, we can redact attorney-client privilege stuff. There's like a very narrow list, juvenile criminal records, and there are certain things, technology, infrastructure, but really assume that everything you write is going to go out the door and behave accordingly. So tips and tricks: use city email for city purposes, private accounts for private communications, minimize your written communications. This is something we've all forgotten in the last 20 years, but you should pick up a phone. You should walk over to someone's office. In person is the best. You don't create a record, and therefore we won't have to produce it. Destroy records pursuant to retention schedules, and for now, just remember to delete all your transitory records because it's less to cull through. And attorney-client privilege is a real thing, and it is wonderful. And if you ever have something that could relate to potential litigation that you're worried will get us in trouble, I can be copied on those emails, and that will somewhat protect the legal questions that you're asking from production ultimately. Rebecca, our PRO, would ask you to put confidential somewhere on the email if you think it's confidential, because that will trigger her brain to review it more closely for potential exemptions. Okay. Yep.
Thank you. Since this is a public meeting and open to the public, and hopefully there's some folks that are listening, can you explain why council members are not responding on social media to issues?
Yeah.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
Just because we've had a conversation about potentially using social media as a council member recently, I would love maybe if you could include speaking to that as part of that question.
Yes, and I will get into that on the OPMA as well, but okay, let's just use Facebook because it's the easiest. Everyone understands Facebook. Don't get me started on the other stuff. So in some cities, there are Facebook accounts. Like here, I think we have one for the city and one for police. And rec has their own. So the city has 3 accounts. They will be in charge of posting information that people need to know. Streets closed, there was an incident, there is a fair, all of that stuff. The city is not in the business of conducting open public discourse on Facebook. And there are many reasons for that. But the first one I'm about to get into is it can violate the OPMA. If there are multiple council members chiming in on a topic that is related to city business, technically they could create a quorum, which would violate the OPMA, and that would be highly problematic. So we do not recommend that council members engage on city business online. The second problem is arguably every time council members chip in on a topic on Facebook in their professional capacity, they're creating a public record. And how far that spans and how that is collected boggles the mind. So one of my recommendations is to have a personal Facebook and a professional Facebook if you're going to use Facebook. Everyone should get off Facebook, period. But I realize that that's not possible, especially for people who are trying to build community. I get it. So it is my advice that you have 2 Facebook accounts. We'll skip some slides later. And your personal account, you do whatever you like. You shouldn't comment on city business, right? Because that crosses the line we were talking about earlier to making something a potentially city record. So that's when you talk about the science fair at school and the polar bear plunge. But when you have your council member Facebook profile, it should say, well, your personal one should say, this is a personal Facebook account. Your professional one should identify that this is my council member Facebook account. You need to be very, very careful, and I would suggest not commenting anywhere on city business because you would potentially create a quorum if all of you did that. So it is not advisable for council members even to go on the city Facebook pages, the official city Facebook pages, and comment or thumbs up. Because what if 6 of you thumbs up a development proposal? What does that mean? I don't know. The case law hasn't been established yet, but I wouldn't want to defend that case. So I recommend that council members stay away from Facebook to the extent possible. It is a great place for you to share community news on your own professional or council member page, perhaps. Whether or not you can disable the comments is a question mark. If you're really talking about topics that you want to engage in, you probably wouldn't want to. And then if you're commenting on other people's page, how do you capture that? So I would like you to all minimize your participation on Facebook, but I'll get into it more later. The OPMA is the Open Public Meetings Act. It requires all meetings of government bodies are open. There are some things that are not open. Licensing, quasi-judicial matters, APA matters, and you guys have very smartly minimized your quasi-judicial and APA matters. But the last one, collective bargaining matters, often throws people for a loop. We'll call it a closed session. You don't have to notice it like an official public meeting. You don't have to call it out like an executive session. You can literally all walk into a kitchenette together and talk about collective bargaining, and that's okay. That's not in violation of the OPMA. But pretty much everything else is covered by the OPMA. So what is a meeting? It's when a quorum of the city council gathers with the collective intent of talking business, city business. An action is when you consider or review or discuss city business, which is exactly what goes back to the Facebook thing. Talk about a new developer coming to town, or a new grocery store is considering buying this, this block and building. Everybody thumbs up it. Well, does that mean that 6 of you like this development and would approve this development? Is that sufficient to constitute discussion of a potential proposal? If so, you've just violated the OPMA, which I don't recommend. Serial meetings are another way of saying that. It's when council member 1 calls council member 2 to talk about an issue, council member 2 Facebooks, texts, calls, they see each other at the grocery store, and that little chain can constitute a quorum, and you don't all have to be together at once, and you don't have to talk in the same form or fashion. It can be voicemails, it can be, DMs, things I've probably never even heard of on social media. It can be any means of communication as long as you're all talking about the same topic. You all just need to be aware of the number 5, right? You can't do this with 5 people. It can only ever be 4. So passive receipt of information is permissible, which is why sometimes I or Jeff will send all of you information. You'll all get the council packet, but you're not allowed to respond to that. It's only for informal purposes, and that's frequently why you'll see us BCCing you so that you don't inadvertently reply all with even a thank you. That could be problematic. And you just want to be really cognizant of that chain of 5. So this is another question I get asked regularly. Does it violate the OPMA if the city council communicates with each other in advance of a public meeting how you intend to vote on a piece of legislation? And this is, yep.
Chain of 5 or chain of 4?
7.
4
Quorum.
is the issue, right?
4.
Okay, just
4.
Just checking.
Sorry. I work with, this is a total digression. I work with Aberdeen and they have a council of 12. It's amazing. So if a quorum of the legislative body, such as the city council, collectively commits or promises to each other to vote as a group in favor or in opposition of a piece of legislation, then such a commitment may be evidence that the majority of the body attended a meeting and would, with the collective intent to take action in violation of the OPMA. So there's a lot of talk about, I got the votes for this. You need to be really careful when you think you've got the votes for something and saying that out loud and how you collected those votes. You certainly, I know that in strong mayor cities, mayors will often count votes to see what's happening beforehand. But as council members, you need to be cognizant of who you're talking to and how far that information is going so that you don't inadvertently violate the OPMA. The penalties for noncompliance are nullifying the action, which is kind of a bummer, and potentially $500 or $1,000 for subsequent violations. And the real tail wagging the dog there is that the person will get attorney's fees. And those things, we've seen in public records cases can be $200,000. They're massive. So they win a $500 fine, but they get $250,000 in attorney's fees. It feels like a big loss. And I should also, Jeff would have me say, and Jeff always interrupts me at trainings to say this, insurance doesn't cover these things, usually. It's coming out of the general fund. One thing about OPMA is that Zoom bombings are happening a lot. I think the attorneys at my firm, we go to several city council meetings a week. In the last month, just my firm members and I have probably seen like 6 Zoom bombings. They're happening a lot right now. So I'm speaking to the person who can quickly and should quickly call off the meeting. The best practices is to say, I think we should take a recess and shut her down. This lady over here knows what to do in terms of trying to protect our system from potential Zoom bombers. The way that you've set up public comment is exactly with this in mind. That's why they have to get prior permission if anybody ever complains about it. It's to avoid hate speech and pornography interrupting the meeting. They'll turn off Zoom, and we should recess the meeting, sort of gather and restart once the problem's been solved. But it is happening a lot, so don't be surprised. No one's shown up in person yet, though. And social media, spoiler over here, we already probably talked about it. 2 accounts, personal and official, label each one. This is my personal Facebook page. This is my council member. You should always say, unless otherwise specifically indicated, all opinions expressed here are strictly my own. Remember, as a council member, you need to identify when you're speaking as your own individual council member opinion versus the opinion of the body. And you're not allowed to speak for council. You can say, well, the majority voted this and I happen to agree with it. And the majority voted that and I voted nay. And I personally believe ... And council members can be personally liable for First Amendment violations under 1983 in a federal lawsuit. Very rarely happens, but a little fear is never a bad thing. And because it's silly season, that time of year, remember about campaigning on social media, campaigning in general. You are not allowed to use any facilities, city facilities for campaign, and that does mean cell phones, it means surfaces, it means email accounts. And again, I understand that a lot of your constituents don't appreciate the differences. So if something bad happens and they contact you on the wrong account, just redirect them, delete it, and send them to the right place. That's the best you can do. The other thing to keep in mind is that it's okay to talk about, remember to go vote. You know, you hear that at pretty much every council meeting this time of year. Don't forget to go vote. The primaries are today. Go vote. But you should not talk about campaign statements or advocating for certain positions at an open public meeting. And that's it. Any questions?
Sorry. For those of us who are actually campaigning, and part of what we are obviously running on is this is what we're doing now, you know, as a council member. And maybe what we're doing now is participating in something that's on property, like outside. Are we saying that we can't use those pictures that might be taken as part of our campaign, illustrating that this is what, you know, the person that you want to retain is actively doing?
Use a personal camera. I would say use your own camera, take your own, I was about to say film. No one has film anymore. Bring your own camera, have your friend, not a colleague, take the picture. I would advise you to step off the block so that you're not squarely in City Hall, maybe just a little bit further away. But there's no case saying that that's illegal per se. I can't really advise you personally on all of this stuff, but to say don't use city facilities. Oh yeah, you wouldn't want to use your city headshot.
Yeah.
You get your own picture.
How about the plaza?
That's a great question.
And then in one of our parks.
Yeah, I don't want to advise you on that.
Okay.
It's a very good question. Yeah.
Thank you. When we have someone with a public records request, and it's a large one that requires, let's say 92 hours of work by staff, and then they don't pay, just so folks know that all the work has to go into produce, and that was only partial.
So massive requests like that are usually designed to do exactly that, to frustrate the city and to cost money. Very frequently, those large requests don't get paid for and picked up. And the charge, by the way, does not cover the actual work. We have a public records schedule that says, you know, it's like 10 cents for oversized copies or something like that. It's it does not pay Rebecca's salary, nor does it replace her ample patience that she spends every day on these things. So no, we have no ability to recuperate those costs or our time and effort really ever. And the best we can do is we usually if it's a massive request, we'll do it in installments so that if they at least don't pick up the first installment, we don't have to continue with the rest of it. But no, it's very frustrating, and there are certain people who do this professionally by design. But you have to treat everybody exactly the same, whether or not they're known for that. You have a great staff. I couldn't do it. Any other questions? Nope.
I don't see any hands going up online.
All righty. That's all I got. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Look, I did it.
Yes. All right, so we have I didn't see the agenda it was probably on the last part of the scrolling. Yeah. So we're going to review the August 21st agenda. Does anyone have any objections to anything on there? Okay, and then next is council comments. Does anyone have any council comments? Okay, I don't see any hands going up. And so next on our agenda is adjournment. We're adjourned.
Take care, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.